Hello everybody, here we are today doing a Week 10 recap of the past week of action we saw in the CFL. Now before we start, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or the channel, the CFL, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get on into it. So the first game of the week was the Winnipeg Blue Bombers traveling to Edmonton to play the Elks, who are coming off of a bye, obviously, and then they gave Trey Ford the first start of the season. Obviously, things got off to a shocking start here as you saw Kevin Brown with a 65-yard dash to the house for a touchdown to give Edmonton the early lead. Then a little bit later, you see Trey Ford get a rushing touchdown. We've talked about how before Winnipeg with these mobile quarterbacks obviously are something that they need to address. As he gets a touchdown, it is 15-0. A little bit later, it is Zach Colaro stumbling around in the back of the pocket. Play is just probably all over the place at the point. Anyway, he's feeling a lot of pressure. He's scrambling. Things are not going so well. He ends up trying to pitch the ball to Brady Oliveira. Instead, it is Purifoy who ends up getting a pick six to give Edmonton an early 22-0 lead. Who expected that? One problem though. On the play, Colaros got hurt. Luckily, it doesn't seem to be a serious injury. However, he was going to be ruled out the rest of the game. So in comes Drew Brown down 22. So despite facing an uphill battle, Brown ends up connecting to Dalton Schoen a little bit later in the first half here as Winnipeg gets its first touchdown of the game late in the second. Now luckily for them, you would end up seeing Sergio Castillo get a field goal before the end of the first half. So instead of it being 22-0 where it feels like all hope is lost, it's 22-10 at the break. Then in the second half, you would see Trey Ford end up throwing the ball to Mitchell for a really good deep shot. The only problem is a little bit later, I think it might have actually been the next play, they end up turning the ball over. Winnipeg ends up scoring off that drive. There is Nick Dembski who hauls this one in. He ends up making this a very close game as it is 22-17, and you're starting to worry a little bit if you're Edmonton saying, hey, I've seen this before, it looks like we're about to collapse. No problem though. Kyron Moore ends up scoring a 70-yard touchdown off just a little screen pass here, and it is a fast and needed break for Edmonton as they end up taking the lead and extending it a little bit. Then some more unfortunate news if you're an Edmonton fan, as you end up seeing Dakota Prukop a little while later. I think it's in the third quarter, end up getting a rushing touchdown here. So again, Edmonton feeling the pressure from Winnipeg, who are keeping it close, and things continue to go progressively downhill as an unfortunate interception by Trey Ford then leads to a one-handed touchdown by Kenny Lawler. And for the first time, we see Winnipeg take the lead. Later in the fourth quarter, Drew Brown handles a blitz insanely well, throws the ball to Brady Oliveira, who scores with about 4 minutes left. This would be the final score, though, as we would see Edmonton end up losing this one, falling to 0-9. Winnipeg ended up going 7-2. Again, keeping that spot top of the West. And I know it is discouraging if you're an Edmonton fan saying, yeah, we did it again. We just collapsed yet again. But I look at it this way. There were some big plays, there were some exciting moments, and this Edmonton team, while they may have ended up losing that lead that they had, was fun. And for a lot of these games, Edmonton hasn't necessarily been fun, especially the offense. So while it is still a loss, there are some positives. As for Winnipeg, seems like Colaros will be okay, so that is good, but it is testament, absolute testament to this team that their backup quarterback can come in down 22. I don't care who it's against, whether it's against Edmonton, whether it's against Calgary, whether it's against Toronto. Come back into this game and to, just go in and fill in for an MOP, of course, and win the game with over 300 yards. So for them, a great win. The second game of the week was the Saskatchewan Roughriders traveling to Montreal to play the William Stanback-less, Cody Fajardo-less Montreal Alouettes, as you would see Walter Fletcher and then Caleb Evans fill in for them. Obviously, it seemed like this could be a closer game. Things ended up not being that way, and for the Owls, it seemed like early on, no problem, even though they didn't have their starting quarterback or running back. They were just going to go out there and they were going to run the ball a lot. As you saw plenty of Fletcher and Evans carry the ball in this first drive, with Evans finding pay dirt to take the early 7-0 lead. Fletcher, a little while on, would get a screen pass for 68 yards that accounted for 45% of the passing yards for Caleb Evans. This one as they just threw the ball 13 times. And a few plays later, it's again Caleb Evans with a rushing touchdown to take an early 14-0 lead. Then unfortunately later in the second half, we end up seeing Mason Fine get hurt. He's trying to slide down during a play, ends up hurting his hamstring, will be out reportedly 2 to 3 weeks, and it's Jake Delagala that is going to be coming on to replace him. He throws an interception, unfortunately for him. Fortunately, however, for his team, Caleb Evans, the next play after, throws an interception right back, so the Owls are not able to capitalize, being in Saskatchewan territory, and for them that is a good thing. Bad thing is Austin Mack ends up catching the other big pass by Caleb Evans of the first half. It is a, what is this in my notes, 58-yard touchdown for him. Obviously, that was a lot of work by Mack to get there. Middle of the field, ends up going into the sideline, but ends up scoring, as it is 24-3 Montreal at the break. Not a lot to say here in the second half, as you have Joshua Antwi, a Canadian running back, end up getting a rushing touchdown, which is always cool to see. And for Montreal, that extended the lead. Tyrese Beverette had another defensive touchdown, as this made this game really unpalatable for 99% of the fans. Ultimately, Montreal wins the ball, wins this game, running the ball 33 times, passing the ball 13 times, as overall they just bullied the Rough Riders. Obviously, they're down to their third-string quarterback, which they made a trade for Pipkin. But yeah, this was a tough loss for them, and the Owls, who were slumping a couple weeks ago, have multiple wins now in a row and are firmly in that second spot out east. Then the Calgary Stampeders travel to BC to play a divisional rival in the Lions, who are out for blood, and the Stampeders were going to be that sacrificial horse, if you want to say that way, for this game. The offense ended up having 16 drives, according to 3 Down Nation. 4 of those were able to go for 20 more yards. All the other 12 remaining ones went for 19 or less. And this was Vernon's first game back. Obviously, he had a lot to prove here and looked great on the first drive, able to get a couple big throws. One of those being a touchdown pass to Hollins on a drive that was extended thanks to a questionable, and I'm going to even admit that as a BC fan, pass interference call. But of course, that was just one part of this game. Vern decided that Keon Hatcher was going to be a go-to guy, and this one ends up throwing him the ball on at least 3 times on this drive. The ball, one of those being a touchdown, as BC is able to kind of build up this lead a little bit. Mick Alway ends up getting an interception deep in Calgary's territory, so that is good for them to keep points off of the board. But a blocked punt turns into a Taquan Mizell receiving touchdown to push this one more into BC's favor, as it is 27-6 at the half. The game already feels like it's out of reach, but in the CFL, no lead is safe. Not too much, though, unfortunately, to say in the second half, because there was no lead that was unsafe in this game, as Calgary scores you 3 more points. Lucky Whitehead finds pay dirt for the first time this season, and in the end, it was BC's defense that didn't allow much of anything in this game. The team was able to force points or turnovers on defense and special teams, so that's good there. The offense was able to make huge plays with this. Keon Hatcher had like 170 yards on the day, and BC stays neck and neck with the Blue Bombers at 7-2. Calgary loses. They're 3-6 on the year. Jake Merritt didn't look incredible, but again, there's points at this season where the offense has had some games where it's been kind of quiet. The final game of the week was the best game of the week, especially that first half. I'm going to apologize because I have to look at my notes for part of this probably, just because there's so much scoring in the first half in this one, as the Ottawa Redblacks travel to Toronto to play the Argonauts. And it was Ottawa that actually surprisingly got out to a pretty big lead, double-digit lead, I guess, with a field goal by Lewis Ward, a 55-yard touchdown by Jalen Ackland. That might have been his first of the season as well. Ackland was cooking in this one, so was Dustin Crum in the first half especially, and they get the lead. But problem is, AJ Ouellette ends up setting a DeVoris Daniel touchdown up, and Daniels ends up fumbling the ball, but he falls back on it, so it's no big deal. There you go. Daniels would have a pretty big game in this one. Not too long after, actually, it was DeVoris Daniels' second one of the game, as Toronto gets the lead for the first time in this one. You'd see a lot of lead changes in the first half, especially as Daniels and the boys were cooking, but so were Crum and co. So then, when Toronto has the lead, it's Justin Hardy that says with about 6.5 minutes left in the quarter, you know what, I'm going to get the lead back for us. Problem is, right after that, it's Chad Kelly who decides to practically sidearm the ball to AJ Ouellette, who is a safety valve on this play. Ouellette does what he does best, and he gets the ball where he seems like he's like 5 yards away from the goal line, and then just goes in there untouched, because I don't think anybody wants to touch him, as Toronto ends up regaining the lead. But Carriel Brooks says, you know what, I am going to help out my offense. They've been doing a good job for us. I'm going to get a pick six and give us the lead. So it's, I think, 24-17, or I think it might have been, I don't even know what. So then Toronto ends up with not a lot of time left in the second half, getting some big plays that just seem to be happening all day in this one. And they get the lead back after the Brooks pick six, and they're up 28-24 at the half. Then, in the second half, you have Javon Leake, who had a fumble either last week or the week before. He redeems himself, and he takes a punt return to the house. Guess what though? Dustin Crum's going to thread the needle. Jackson Bennett and tight spot near the goal line, and they end up staying in this one as well, as we're getting to witness one of the best games of the season. Ottawa does get a goal line stand a little bit later in this game. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot to say for them in terms of getting points after this, as you do see DeVaris Daniels get to hat trick, and at the end of the day, it is Toronto that in the fourth quarter, I think they end up getting a field goal. They end up winning 44-31. It's a 75-point affair. Now, granted, there was a lot of scoring, especially in that first half, and for me, I look at this as a positive, despite the fact that Ottawa lost. You had Crum that played pretty well in this game. The offense looked really good. The defense was able to get some points on the board for them. The Javon Lee punt return touchdown, I do feel like might have been the early nail in the coffin where you don't know it yet, but man, that took a lot of wind out of your sails. But in general, if Crum looks this good, that's amazing. Kelly comes back for Toronto. Their receiving core looked really good. Daniels looked really good, obviously, with 3 touchdowns on the day. Kelly looked comfortable just slinging the ball, whether it was sidearm or down the field. And for their defense, obviously there were some bad moments in that game, but again, playing aside in Ottawa that has a guy like Crum you got to worry about a little bit, made things interesting. But all in all, I got to say, this was a great week of football, a great way to end this one out. Toronto wins the game, and obviously Ottawa feels like they're pushed more away from the playoff positioning, but still a great week of football as we got to see 8 teams that played their hearts out, and some games didn't go the way some teams would have wanted, probably Saskatchewan, but some other games, obviously, we saw a lot of grit, and we saw a lot of close games this week that you maybe wouldn't have expected at some points. But anyway, what are your thoughts on Week 10? Let me know down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe, and have a great night.